Hey, Retcon Raider here. We're currently enjoying the quiet before the storm, so this seemed like a good time to take a step back and have a quick look at how we've been doing over the past few weeks. Obviously, June saw the end of our XCOM Chimera Squad series, and the Gears Tactics series wrapped up in early July. Since then, we've leaned back into a couple of our other fan-favorite series, Kingmaker and Phoenix Point. We'll be talking about those in just a moment, but it is worth noting that we're actually just another couple of weeks from wrapping up our first season of Phoenix Point too. After that, oh boy. Like I said, we've got a proverbial storm on the horizon, starting in late August and theoretically running right through the rest of the year. But before we get into that, let's take a step back, take a look at the numbers, and see how we did back in June. Now, I will preface this by noting that the numbers aren't great. Much like back in Q1, we're still seeing growth, but it's more of the slow and steady variety, as opposed to the dramatic spikes that we saw alongside things like the WL3 Beta back in March, or the Phoenix Point launch last December. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little disappointed. Obviously, I want the channel to succeed. But at the same time, I obviously can't say that this was entirely unexpected. I mean, we actually talked about this last month. As much as I enjoyed playing Gears Tactics and Chimera Squad, both series were starting to struggle towards the end. They just never quite gained the kind of traction that a lot of my other series have enjoyed in the past. Could I have gotten better numbers in June if I had switched off to something else? Probably, and we will actually be talking about that in just a moment. But at the same time, I also don't regret sticking with Gears and Chimera Squad all the way through to the end. Like I said last month, I had a lot of fun playing those games. I know that at least a segment of my audience was invested in them, and it's always nice to get a sense of closure, even if it's not the most successful project in the world. That aside, in the grand scheme of things, our numbers for June actually weren't that bad, especially for a smaller channel like this one. It's easy to look at those numbers and assume it means the channel is doing poorly, but you've got to keep all this stuff in perspective. YouTube analytics aren't going to show a linear chart of progression where each and every month is going to get bigger and better than the last. It's going to ebb and flow based on what you're talking about, what you're playing, how well your audience responds to it, or even just the time of year. In this particular case, we were just coming off an incredible flurry of activity following our wildly successful WL3 Beta series. Pretty much anything is going to look disappointing after that. Compared to some of the other projects I've worked on in the past though, such as XCOM 2, which I actually ran for almost 60 episodes, Gears and Chimera Squad did just fine. Could it have been more successful? Yes, of course, anything can be more successful. But that doesn't mean I should just ignore the level of success that they did find. In both of these cases, I don't think I was ever really expecting anything truly phenomenal. As far as analytics go. Let's be honest, these were both just spin-off titles intended to serve as filler between the major installments for two well-established franchises. They were never going to gain the same sort of traction that something like Wasteland 3 or Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous might get. For what they are, though, again, they did just fine. Anyway, I think I've belabored that point quite enough. So let's move on, shall we? Now, obviously, with Gears and Chimera Squad out of the way, we ended up diving back into a couple of fan favorites, Kingmaker and Phoenix Point. Sure, that's more of a July thing than a June thing, but we're coming in so late in the month, I figure I should at least touch on them. That aside, it actually does give us some extra context when it comes to series like Gears and Chimera Squad. Unsurprisingly, both Phoenix Point and Kingmaker were pretty well received. I mean, there's a reason they regularly place in the top 5 in my monthly interest polls. The early analytics definitely aren't phenomenal, but it's certainly a return to numbers closer to what I like to see. Much as in the past, Kingmaker was met with an initial surge of enthusiasm, with episode 53 quickly racking up 1,000 views within 48 hours of its premiere, but that quickly tapered off as new episodes continued rolling out. Still, even with that initial surge dying down, we're still seeing an overall engagement level of about 30 to 50% higher than what we were getting in the latter half of the Gears or Chimera Squad series. All things considered, that's not too shabby. I think I've mentioned it in the past, but Kingmaker is never going to be a huge earner. Not these days, anyway. We're almost 2 years out from the game's original launch, but it is a stable series. It's one of the ones that I essentially have an entrenched and dedicated audience for, so it's always a safe fallback series that I can return to whenever I'm between bigger and more ambitious projects. Not much else to say there, really. It's a great game, I enjoy playing it, and we've got, something like 100 more episodes to go. We obviously won't be wrapping it up anytime soon, and I'll almost certainly end up having to take a break every once in a while, but I'm definitely in it for the long haul. I'd like to say we'll be wrapping the series up sometime in early 2021, but honestly, who knows? Owlcat Games gave us an almost absurdly long and very well-presented world to explore. I want to give it every bit of attention I think it deserves. Now, Phoenix Point, on the other hand, that's a slightly more problematic title. I don't think anyone can deny that the game launched in a somewhat half-baked state. But to their credit, the developers have actually shown a solid commitment towards improving the game post-launch. We've only seen one DLC pack so far, but we've also seen several major updates and revisions, including a fair amount of completely free new content. I mean, say what you will, but it's always nice to see that sort of post-launch support from any developer, indie or otherwise. And let's be honest, most Kickstarter projects tend to launch in an almost unplayable state anyway. I think Phoenix Point is perfectly decent as it currently is, and I'm really interested in seeing where they go with it by 2021. That said, in the short term, it does present us with a bit of a problem. As much as I enjoyed playing it, and as much as many of you still seem to enjoy watching it, it's very difficult to maintain a consistent series when the rules are literally changing on what feels like a week-to-week basis. That was actually a problem I was having with Darkest Dungeon, too, though never quite to this degree. With Darkest Dungeon, the developers were constantly tweaking and fine-tuning the numbers behind the scenes, even years after launch. Again, I don't want to fault developers for showing that sort of long-term commitment towards improving their game. In fact, it's admirable. I wish more developers were like that. But at the same time, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't also frustrating, feeling like I essentially need to learn and then unlearn and then relearn how major mechanics worked on a semi-regular basis. It's actually one of the reasons I've been hesitant to return to the Darkest of Dungeons, despite it being another one of the series that I still get asked about on a fairly regular basis. Regardless, that's basically where we're getting with Phoenix Point as well. I mean, look, I know we're only 30 episodes into the series, but in that time, we've seen at least 3 major patches, with some of them completely changing existing mechanics. We've also got content updates and DLC that aren't backwards compatible with the campaign already in progress, and yet another major update slated for release later this week, followed by DLC number 2 next month. So, with all that said, I think you'll understand why I've basically decided to speed the series along towards its end. In fact, as of the moment I'm recording this, I've already done the groundwork for our final batch of Phoenix Point episodes. I haven't actually recorded the finale just yet. That one is actually proving a little more problematic than I would like, but I will be working on that over the next couple of days. The Cthulhu patch drops in 4 days, and I've been strongly recommended to go ahead and wrap up my current playthrough before that happens. So that is exactly what I'm doing. Mind you, even with our foot on the gas pedal, it's still going to take us something like 5 or 6 more episodes to actually hit that endgame. But the end is very much in sight. It's almost a shame, really. Even now, the series is actually doing a lot better than I expected it to. In fact, since relaunching the series in mid-July, some of the episodes have already clocked in at well over 2,000 views apiece. That's roughly twice as good as Kingmaker. To put that into perspective, that means the average Phoenix Point episode is currently doing 3 times as well as the majority of our Gears and Chimera Squad episodes. That just seems crazy to me, considering the degree of controversy and mixed reviews surrounding the game, let alone the fact that the game is over half a year old at this point. I think that's a testament to the fact that, despite the belly aching, despite the obvious problems, there really are a lot of folks who are invested in the series and who want to see the game improve. With that in mind, I will say right now, while we will be ending the series soon, probably within the next couple of weeks, we'll also be returning to Phoenix Point in the future. Hey, I started the channel to talk about Phoenix Point. I enjoy the game, despite its flaws, and I'm just as interested as you are in seeing where the developers decide to go with it. I'm pretty comfortable saying that we will definitely be doing a Season 2 for Phoenix Point, somewhere a little later down the line. I just don't think it's going to be until December or January, at the earliest. At the very least, I'd like to wait until they've finished mucking with the core mechanics. In the meantime, I suppose it's also important to start clearing up our schedule. Because, circling back to my original point back when I first started the video, this is just the proverbial calm before the storm. As of right this moment, we are almost exactly 1 month out from the official launch for Wasteland 3, a game which I will obviously be jumping on the second I can get my hands on it. But even ignoring that, we've got all sorts of other potential high-profile projects looming on the horizon. Just off the top of my head, I know we've got the Baldur's Gate 3 Early Access launch, slated for either August or September, with the Wrath of the Righteous Open Beta coming out sometime soon after that. Obviously, those are only suited for short-run mini-series, but I've had some pretty significant success in the past doing those sorts of short-run betas. I'll definitely be touching on both of them in the future. To a lesser extent, we've also got a lot of other potentially interesting titles coming up, including the new Battle Brothers DLC, the Necromunda adaptation, Empire of Sin, Company of Crime, Xenonauts 2, and on and on and on. And while, sadly, a lot of them haven't really gained enough traction in my recent polls to justify a long-term series, I'd still love to at least touch on them with something like an overview or even a short run, if I can find the time for it. It's obviously far too early to make any sorts of commitments now, aside from wrapping up Phoenix Point Season 1 and jumping on Wasteland 3 as soon as humanly possible, but these are the sorts of things that I'm already starting to think about. It's also the sort of thing that my patrons and viewers get to weigh in on with my monthly and quarterly interest polls. So hey, if there's a series that you guys are really interested in seeing me focus on, then be sure to let me know. Worst case scenario, I'll end up doing something else instead, but at least I'll know that it was a series you were interested in. If enough people express a similar interest, then who knows? I might end up revisiting it at some point in the future, between those higher priority projects. At any rate, I think that's just about enough rambling for 1 month, so let's start wrapping this up, shall we? You guys know the drill. As usual, I'd like to thank the rank and file viewers. It may not seem like much, but every time you watch or like or comment on one of my videos, it does make a difference. Every time someone subscribes, it continues our slow but steady ascent towards our first major milestone, 100,000 subscribers. Hey, we're almost 18% of the way there. Here's hoping that games like Wasteland 3 might just propel us past that 20% mark. Who knows, a few more years, and we might finally get our hands on that coveted silver plaque. I look forward to putting it on a shelf and having it immediately broken by my cats. Oh, and of course, I would also like to give special thanks to the Raiders, the folks who are kind or dedicated or just outright generous enough to help support the channel financially. Again, it might not seem like much, but the money that they donate actually does make a world of difference, especially during slower months like this one, or, more difficult times like this one. Seriously, it's thanks to them and their generous donations that I've been able to get the ball rolling on repairing my old rig. That'll give me access to my old notes and archives and software, which means that I can potentially start working on some of my older lore and analysis videos again. It helps keep my shelves stocked with energy drinks, which does go a long way towards getting me through the 40+ hours worth of editing that I'm now doing on a weekly basis. It even helps keep my pantry stocked with some fancier and healthier cat food for my increasingly obnoxious furballs. Trust me, if it seems like they're getting more vocal and intrusive lately, it's because they love that newer and more expensive food, and they are constantly begging for more. Sure, it can get frustrating at times, having Kaiser roaming around, doing his insistent hunting cry, or having Rain poke me in the eye over and over and over again, or having Ellie camping out on my desk or shelves, constantly breaking all of my things. But it's certainly preferable to the alternative. The money the Raiders send me helps keep the fuzzbutts happy, and that, in turn, keeps me happy. So for that alone, I'll always be thankful. That said, special thanks to the honorary Raiders from June: A Normal Joe, A Dragon 707, Austin Fagan, Benjamin Gray, Brad Quinn, Cecil Kane, CRXCRVS, Ethan Vonderweed, ICU Uwu, Kim S. Jensen, Lady Shayna, Mark Giemza, Mark Richards, Matt Leetzen, Maximilian Monk, Mozzie Melton, Rob H., Scott Brown, Tom Edward Idland, Thomas Pietkowski, Andy Oaks. And extra special thanks to the veteran Raiders from June: AdriRaven, Alois, Ash, Ben Hollingshead, Drakiith, Eric Teichmiller, Exsellsior, James Trimmier, Jace Orcblood, Laura and Mike, Leroy Nukenson, Lima, Loki K, Loolaloo, Matthew Holmquist, Mildly Nuclear, Nod Goblin Nico, Sir Skelibate, and Woe77. Oh, and of course, special mention to the Raider Elite, Lord Revenant, Captain Nerd, and Captain Valen, the folks who continue to support the channel at the highest available tiers. I'm going to be blunt here. Between the three of them, their support alone sometimes exceeds the amount of actual ad revenue I get from YouTube during some of these slower months. It's thanks to folks like them that I can often afford to work on the projects that I want to work on, as opposed to the projects that are just likely to be the most profitable. Of course, if you are interested in joining the lofty ranks of the Raiders, then feel free to check out the link to my Patreon and PayPal accounts in the description below. No pressure, of course. It's essentially just a glorified tip to continue making the content that I'm basically already making. It also gives you access to a variety of fun little perks and bonuses, such as my sporadic blog updates, my monthly polls, preferential placement on my waiting lists, occasional shoutouts, and sometimes even early access to some of my videos. And hey, if you can't or just don't want to do that, then that's fine too. I never want people to feel like they're being forced or pressured to support the channel any more than they're comfortable doing. As long as you're still enjoying the videos, I appreciate any support you're willing to send my way. even if it's just the occasional view or critical comment. Look, I get it. I'm never going to be able to keep everyone happy, but I still like to see your feedback. At any rate, I believe that is my allotted time for begging this month, and I've still got a lot to do before this week's batch of new videos is ready to go. That said, this is Retcon Raider, signing off. Thanks for listening. Oh, and remember, if you need to contact me for any reason, you can do so in the comment section on just about any of my videos. Usually. YouTube's notification system does seem to be a bit spotty these days. You can also get in touch with me through the ever-expanding array of social media platforms, including my Discord channel, my Facebook page, my Twitter feed, or my Patreon account. You can also just use my official email address. As always, links are in the description.